Hi, so welcome to part 3 of drawing Batgirl. So in the last video I finished inking the drawing. So in this video I'm going to ink the rest of it. I'm going to do some things with the hair, I'm going to add some finishing touches, and then I'm going to prepare the drawing for color, which means that I'm going to figure out how the shadows work, and I'm going to add tone and volume to all the entire drawing. Hi, my name is Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist in the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 20 years now, and I'm here to empower you. So, yeah. So this is my approach to doing things. At the moment, the way that I approach drawing and coloring is the way that I'm going to show you now. So, let's get started, and then I'll show you what I mean. All right, so sorry about that. I've been having some technical difficulties. I couldn't see the video for some reason. All right, so okay. So here, what I'm doing is adding some tone to, some strokes to the hair to make it look more like hair. Up to this point, really the hair just doesn't look like hair. It just looks like these shapes. And it was really bothering me. So I kept on wondering, like, what can I do? What can I do? And of course, the obvious thing to be able to do is to simply add some hair shading in it, add some hair feathering in it. The idea here is that hair has tone. There's value. There's areas in it that it's in shadow, but when hair goes into shadow, it's not a simple shape. It's a very graphic kind of shape with a lot of reflection, and there's a lot of different shapes that the hair makes. So when we're inking, we're trying to emulate that kind of chaos of hair, and it's just simply darker, and then it moves into the light. So here I am trying to make it look as pleasing as possible. Again, the idea here is to have this shape that I'm making kind of look as if it's traveling, and as if it's hair. It has to travel along with the shape of the surface shape that I've already created. It's supposed to give volume to it. It's supposed to be as if I'm traveling across it. So it's defining the form on its surface. So it should do that, as well as indicate where the light is hitting it and where the light is not hitting it, where it's darkest in the hair feathering that I'm doing is where the light is not hitting. And so just by doing this, it's already looking way more like hair. Eventually I will add a few extra details to make it even more hair-like, but I think this was the very first time where the hair finally started really feeling like hair. Excuse me. So here I'm defining that the hair is turning away from us with the direction of the line work, and I'm also defining that the hair is going up behind the other section of hair. I think that's that, and again here also it's turning away from us. It's turning away. So I'm adding those lines to reinforce the turning of the hair. You don't want to just willy-nilly put a bunch of lines. The lines should inform the structure of in the direction the hair is actually moving. So now I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be doing here. Let's see. Oh, so I've selected the exterior line, the exterior shapes of the drawing. So that I'm checking I'm creating a new layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a selection layer, which means that I'm going to just create a gray that goes just inside all of Batgirl. So the way I do that is I select all the white space around the Batgirl, and then I invert the selection, and then I pick a neutral gray, and I create the so here it is, I'm inverting it, and then I get a neutral gray, and you'll see I'll paint bucket it all in. It's at 50%, it's the 50% one, and there you go. So now anytime I want to select just what's inside and not go outside the lines, I get my wand tool, I go to that layer, and I click on the gray, and it just selects the Batgirl, and that helps me not have to be too careful about painting inside the lines or not. So I pick an even darker gray because I'm going to now work out the shadows, the key light shadow, like the main hard shadow coming in on her. So I'm thinking that the light will be coming in from the right, which means that the shadow will be coming in from the left. And I do this by picking the mono pen, and I just sloppily start putting in a shadow pattern. I also named the layer selection. Can't see it because too much because of the little Patreon banner I've got there, but so that's a 90% black. Well, no, it's not the 90%. I think it's the 70%. So there you go. So I'm already putting in the shadows. And it's a hard shadow. It's not going to be soft. It's not. I'm not shading. I'm just picking out the darkest areas where the shadow is hitting, and that's it. It's not going to be something fancy. I am thinking about the planes of the face. I'm thinking about the face in a boxy way, like if it was a box and the head had corners from here to here, that sort of thing. Like what's the corner, and then just deliberately make it sharp. And I noticed that I hadn't put an eye socket and the eye lid on that eyeball, so I added that in there. There was no eyelid and eyelid above the muscle above the eyelid, not the eye socket, but because the eye socket is even a little bit wider than that. But I'm just checking to see if it would be necessary to have the white. I'm just actually I don't know what I'm doing here. Just because I added an extra line there because it seemed like I ought to. And now I'm trying to erase something that is not erasing. Not quite sure what's going on. I forgot what I was doing here. Out of all the videos that I've done so far, I think I've edited this video the most, by which I mean there was a whole lot of just pauses, long pauses, and I don't think they were for any other reason other than somebody came into the room and interrupted me and I started talking to them. Because I don't think I was thinking about anything artsy about it. So hopefully I've edited all these really long pauses for no good reason out of this video and you won't notice it at all. But I'm just letting you know that there were really long pauses where nothing was moving, and it wasn't because I was thinking about what to do next. It was simply because I think I was talking to somebody. Okay, so now remember what, as I said, if her face was a box, where would the corner be? So that's what I'm doing right now. If her head was a box, where would the corner of the box be? And I'm literally drawing that corner. That is called it'll be the terminator. It's where the light ceases to shine beyond. So that line that I drew is where the light stops from lighting. So anything to the left of that line will be in shadow. So I have to make a choice, artistic choice as to where I believe that the light stops, and what that shape looks like when the shadow stops hitting the figure. So it's good practice to draw boxes and learn learn what that looks like. It's also a good practice to add these kind of shadows to cylinders and balls, and then after a while, once you get good at doing that, then you start adding them to more complicated shapes where they're a little bit more combined, ball connected to cubes and things like that. Because that's exactly what I'm doing here. There's cylinders where in the cylinder would the Terminator be, where in the ball would the Terminator be, where in this sphere would the Terminator be, and I'm treating everything very boxy so that it's easier for me to wrap my head around where the light stops hitting. And at this point you could also cheat a little bit sometimes just for the sake of making it look nice. And yeah, so there you go. I'm just adding, oops. So I'm using the paint bucket tool, assuming that I've locked in, that once I put the paint bucket tool, it would only add tone to the areas that I've, all the way to, to the line, but there you go, like that. But then there's some areas that aren't closed off, so I got to make sure to close off all the in anything that so that it doesn't bleed, and I could properly just add the tone where it needs to be. And this gives me a guide as to also where the light is coming from. It defines the light. Now I'm clearing this area because it's far enough behind her that maybe the light is passing there and she's just casting a shadow. That was my thinking. Just that the light on the left, the shadow on the left, is actually probably from her body. There's light coming in there. So I gotta add a shadow underneath her arm and in part of the cape, maybe, or maybe not. I think there's a shadow there, but not anywhere else. And those of you with a little bit more of an astute drawing eye will notice that there is something wrong with the cape on Batgirl. And so I eventually go and fix it. So I think this is the wrong decision with the cape. I don't think that the cape is necessarily getting hit by shadow in this way. There's some mistakes with the cape. Showed this to my mentor, my friend and colleague, Paul Wee from The Simpsons. And he had a few things that he gave me some constructive criticism on this drawing. So eventually I fix it up so that it's it works a little bit better than it does here. But it's always good to have somebody like Paul, like to point out the things that you can't see for yourself. Sometimes you're too close to a project and you just don't realize that you've messed up. And it's always good to like be able to go, hey, what do you think? And have somebody take a look and go, I think X, Y, Z, and you can decide whether or not they are right or they are wrong on your own. It's your decision to listen or not. But in the case of Paul giving me some critique, it was very practical advice. It wasn't like style things or anything else. So, and I will talk about that when I fix that in the video where I fix, do the fixes. So again, I'm treating these like boxes because they are boxes. So here's a very clear example, excuse me, a very clear example of what I'm talking about when I say that I'm thinking about things in a boxy way. So it's not as clear when a shape like her hip is round and I'm thinking about it like a box. It's easier to see when it is box and there is a corner there. But it's essentially the same thing that I'm doing there. I'm treating everything as if it has a corner, and I'm defining that corner, and from that point on, and from that place, the light doesn't hit beyond that spot. So this is just the shadow that is created from, say, a key light coming in, breaking the figure into two very simple light sources. Either there is light hitting it or there isn't, and that's it. There isn't any light in the shadows, and there isn't any shadows in the light. And here I'm trying to define the chest area. Like, what would be the corner if her chest is coming out? Then the shadow of that chest would it parallel, or would it make a different shape altogether? Depends on what that shape is. So at this point, because it's digital, I can experiment and see what's working, what's not working. I could change my mind about it. It's extremely helpful. I'm also deciding here whether or not to add even more wrinkles for the sake of making it look a touch more natural. But I think 2 was a bit much. I think it didn't seem natural. I think I eventually erased it and went with only the 1. Adding a cast shadow from the jacket, giving it some depth as if there's some space in between the jacket and her hip. Okay. I think I'm almost done. I just took a good long look at it, see how it all was looking like, how it was playing out. I think I just decided that I needed to define the corner of her head, of her head a bit more. I think I had some values in the eyes. I see. Just refining. This is all just about refining. There's a cast shadow there. I refine the face so that it feels like there's a corner there. A cast shadow from the cape. Some very fine, ooh, excuse me, some very fine line work here for this part of the collar. And most people aren't really going to be paying attention to. Boy, I'm yawning a lot and I'm about ready to pass out. I think I've actually almost fallen asleep twice watching this. It's kind of relaxing, but I woke up extremely early today. And now I'm feeling it and I'm doing something that is just like, and then look at how I'm slowly, and I'm making myself fall asleep. My goodness. Wow. I gotta make sure that I'm not putting you to sleep, for crying out loud. Yeah, see, this is like really tedious stuff. Like, going in and like really paying attention to the shapes that the shadow is making. So I don't do a very sloppy job about it. I go in there and I make sure that everything is within the lines and inside the lines and is making the shapes that it's supposed to make. And this takes time. It takes time to do this. This is one of the reasons why I didn't want to speed up the video. I wanted to show you that those sped up videos, it just makes it seem like, oh, you should be done in 20 minutes, 10 minutes, because you know you should have a whole full thing ready to go because it's just sped up so much. So I'm just looking for places where I went over the line. And wherever I went over the line, you know, I erase it. Wherever I got sloppy. So I zoom out to take a good long look at what it looks like. And I caught a few places where it needed a little bit more of finesse. You are essentially designing pleasing shadow patterns. And so the pleasing shadow patterns need to be appealing and pleasing. So because you're just creating graphic shapes here at this point. You're attempting to create an interesting and naturalistic shadow aesthetic design pattern. And so it takes time to does this look good, does that not look good, if I do this, what does that happen, if I don't do that, I don't like it, maybe I should just adjust it, maybe if this is gone over here, maybe if I do this and that. That's essentially what I'm doing. And then I pull out really far just to kind of like, and then I squint just to see if the patterns feel right, what needs work, what doesn't work, what's working, what isn't working. So you have these buttons or clips or whatever that keep the cape on there, and we just added a little bit more depth to them. All right. I think at this point, it doesn't mean. At this point, I think I'm okay with where I've got the shadow patterns. That doesn't mean that I can't go back and adjust them later. It just means that as of this moment in the drawing process, I think that the shadow patterns are landing where they ought. So the next step that I do is I'm probably going to add some volume to the drawing. So I turn off the shadows, and I'm going to create this layer called tone. And so what I'm going to be doing moving forward without the shadow pattern in there is I am going to create the form of the object through tone. Now, if anybody has used a computer program, you would know that when you first turn on the not computer but a 3D, a CG computer program where you're modeling objects in CG, you know that usually when you first pick an object, like say a sphere, it's gray. It's a gray field. Most of these programs have a neutral gray as the background, and the object, when it is not, say, in polygons where you could actually see the polygons, but when it is in its rendered form, not rendered, but where you could see the actual object itself, it tends to also be gray. And the thing is that we wouldn't be able to see that object if it wasn't for the fact that there is a kind of neutral ambient light in the program that is shining on it, so that we could see the ball gradually get a little bit darker as it gets to the edge, so that we could actually distinguish it from the background. Well, that's what I'm doing here, is adding like an ambient light so that it creates form around the object. So say that there was a light source really far away, shining on her, coming straight at her from above. Because the light source is so far away, it creates a very soft transition, lighting her very softly around, as opposed to the extreme light source. Say like from here, like I have a lamp here, and you can see on my hand that it's an extreme light source. You could see in my hand that there's a clear light area and a clear dark area. But the further I get from the light, the less extreme it is, the softer that transition becomes. Even further it goes, the softer it becomes even more. So I'm assuming that there is somewhere in this drawing a light so far away that it's creating a soft edge all around her, causing our eye to see the gradual darkening of the figure as it recedes from that faraway light. And that's what I'm doing here. So I'm doing that just so that I can wrap my head around how her entire body is being formed by that light. So I'm using the color pencil tool in Manga Studio or Clip Studio Paint to do this. What I did, because right out of the box, the tool comes with a thick and thin. So the pressure, the harder you press, the wider the thinner you press, the lighter you press, the thinner the line. Well, I turned off that jitter off, so that it gives, so it's as if the pencil is one thickness, and so I use the keyboard to shrink and increase the lines as I need it, so that my pen pressure, what it does is it adds thickness. It darkens when I press hard, and it's if I'm doing it lightly, it's a soft line, and when I'm pressing hard, it's a darker line. And the color that I used for this is not black. I think I'm using 70% gray, something around that point. So it's not black, because if you use black, it gets too extreme. You want your drawing to not go to black. What you want is simply something that will define the form, and sometimes that requires a lighter pencil, sometimes not. Now, it's possible that the neutral gray that I'm using, which is at 50%, might be too dark. It's possible. So here, I went outside the line. I'll eventually erase that extra part, but this is a little bit, you have to be a little bit more careful, because it is its own object, but it's within the selected area. So, and notice that the arm, the way that I'm shading it, is exactly like I would shade a cylinder. Excuse me. Now I'm taking the same color pencil tool. I'm doing something that I really like about Manga Studio / Clip Studio Paint, and that is that you could use the tool that you're using, and if you notice the color that I'm coloring with right now, if you go all the way down to the bottom right column, you'll notice that I'm no longer, I picked the gray area, but I picked the little box, the checkered box on the very bottom between the two colors. And what that does is it essentially gives you an eraser, but that handles exactly like the pencil, the tool that you're using. So in this case, it handles exactly like a colored pencil, and it erases like a colored pencil, which means that when I press hard, it erases harder. When I press softer, it erases softer. So I was thinking there with the chest area, I was thinking very boxy, if you noticed. I'm thinking just straights. Just here's the plane of the bottom plane. I'm not thinking round, I'm thinking boxy. This is the box shape. And notice also that the shape that I made here is different than the cast shadow, than the shadow shape that I made. I think that this is more accurate. And eventually I go back and I fix that shadow area. Now I'm softening it a little bit more. I'm doing this fairly quickly. Trying to get through it as fast as I can. Thinking about how can these forms be clearly defined? How can I clearly define these forms? If I was to turn off the line work, can you see the forms? Can you see the figure without the lines being there? If you can, then I did my job. If you can't, and if it looks like mud or it doesn't look like anything, then I have to rework it. So more cylindrical. This is the entire arm is one giant cylinder, broken up into shapes. So usually, like if you're looking at Bridgman, like the bicep here is really boxy. Then once we get here to the upper arm, it gets round, and then once we get here to all the bones, it gets boxy again. But I am not doing that here, in part because the coat she's wearing is so thick that you can't see the anatomy, and it's just a big tube. Okay, so this is one of the areas that I think is not working the way I intended. Like, well, a little bit. It is true that as the cape goes further in, it should get darker. But here's the thing: I wanted it to look concave. The cape, I wanted it to look concave, so I wanted it to look like this, like it would, like the cape was moving further out like that, but what I did was make it look like this, make it look solid coming around that way. And the reason why it looks like that is because I'm putting tone on the sides the same exact way that I put the tone on the arm. So the arm looks concave, but I wanted the cape to look convex, which meant that the darkest area needed to be right here in the middle. And the closer to us it got, the lighter it got. I messed up. In the final version that I ended up doing, I keep it that way, and it's fine. It's not like it ruins the picture. It's not like it ruins the drawing. It's not like it ruins the final painting. It doesn't. But it wasn't my intent. You see? So in a later video, I go back and I fix it so that it's more closer to my intent instead of what I was doing. And in this video, I just wasn't thinking, and it's really odd because you'll see me later try to work out the cast shadow of the cape landing in the back of the cape, and I'll point it out when I'm doing it. And I'm going, well, I was looking at I actually had a thing on my desk, and I was like, oh, actually it's not a thing. It was my Wacom tablet. It was this. So I opened it up and I looked at this side because it is convex, see. And then I saw how the cast shadow landed on the thing. And then I try to emulate it, but it still didn't look right, and it's because the shadow patterns on the cape itself were in the wrong place. The tones were in the wrong place. So I'll eventually fix it in a way later video where I fix the things that Paul critiqued me about. Because I told him that I realized I messed up. And I just thought, okay, well, I might as well fix it. If I'm going to fix what Paul asked me, pointed out, then I might as well fix the tone as well. And like I said, the final drawing that I did, the final postcard that I did, still has this version, but it doesn't make it any less a decision. It just makes it so that it wasn't my intent originally. So again, just trying to add form and volume to all the areas of her body, and this is pretty sloppy. I come in here again. So here you can see that I picked the there I go. I picked the black again. So whenever I need to refine something slightly lighter, and when I know that I overdid it or I overstepped, I'm going to do it pretty soon, I know, because some of that leg area is not quite working. I see, there you go. I clicked on the checkered area, and that gives me, it makes it an eraser. And so now I have a pencil that erases, and it gives me the texture of the pencil and the quality of the pencil tool, and makes it an eraser. And I love that about this program, because it means that you can go back and refine an area with and still and delete lightly some areas and refine some areas, and still keep the texture of something that resembles an organic tool like the colored pencil tool in this program. And if you look closely, you can see that what I'm talking about. There's a texture to the pencil, the color pencil tool, that has a grain to it, and I like that. It still looks digital, and it's kind of difficult to not have your drawings look too digital unless you're using a brush that is extremely organic looking. But yeah, it still has that digital look to it, but at least it has more of a texture to it. I'm just checking to see what else I need to work on. Okay, so adding the tone right in between these two to give the seam of the jacket volume. Thinking about it as two very thin tubes, which means that they'll be dark on both ends. as they turn away from the light. So when I'm doing this, I'm constantly thinking that I'm thinking about what the simple shape of each object is. So each object that I'm drawing or adding tone to is either a cylindrical shape, a boxy shape, or a spherical shape. And depending on what I believe I'm shading, whether it's a cylinder, a sphere, or a cube, I'm going to approach adding the tone in a different way. So for the most part, limbs, arms, torsos, they tend to be pretty cylindrical, so they follow the shading of cylinder formula. But then some areas like the chest are often spherical, or in this case a little bit boxy. And I'm adding some volume to the buttons there. And I'm going to take a look as to what else I need to do. And I think that this area is a bit sloppy, but I'm still adding a little bit of gradient to things. Sorry, I'm falling asleep again. This is just too relaxing. So I don't recommend you watch this if you're tired, because you're going to pass out like I am passing out. Fixing the belt here. And I think I'm going to have to make some adjustments here on the leg because it's looking a little bit sloppy. And it looks like that's the end of this video. Okay, so I think that there's going to be a little bit more refining in the next video, but that is the way that I approach adding tone to a drawing before I even add color to it. So I am going to take a nap now because I'm going to want to record another video and I don't want to fall asleep. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you got something out of it, I would encourage you to go to my Patreon and support me there. If you do, you're going to get, depending on your support, different kinds of rewards for your support. And I also do coaching there too, if you're interested in that. But if you're not, then and you want to participate in, say, this giveaway, like this postcard that I'm drawing will eventually be a postcard that I gave away. It's already been sent off and it's been given away. So, but if you want to get into the next on the next one, then if you're part of my Patreon supporters, I give away an original art piece every month, as well as, like I said, digital goodies like wallpapers and other things like that, artwork that I do every month. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye.